Hello. Finally, almost done. This entire thing, minus the poems. Only 10 pages left. Two essays, Abraham Lincoln and Carlyle. I guess I'm supposed to know what that guy's first name is. I think after that, it's only going to take like 30 minutes probably. After that, I might read some of this, which I'm kind of excited about. I was able to find the first 3 volumes from the original Great Books of the Western World set from Encyclopedia Britannica, which is kind of cool because the first 3 volumes found it in a used bookstore. Make up the Syntopicon, which is kind of the unique thing about this set. The whole idea behind it was this modern philosopher, Mortimer Adler, author of How to Read a Book, which is what he's kind of most known for. He wanted to create a set of books that could be used as a reference if you wanted to know more about any particular philosophical idea. So I guess first he categorized all the great ideas, or as he refers to them, the great ideas, into like 100 something different ideas, like starting with angel and ending with world. So the first volume of the Syntopicon is Angel to Love, and the second one is Man to World. So basically what these are is big books of, what do you call it? Like citations. Like it goes through each chapter starts with like an introduction to the idea, and then the next, after that's done, the next pages are, next sections is outline of topics and then references. So the idea is you use this Syntopicon as a way to reference everywhere through Western literature exactly where these ideas were talked about in any of these books. And so you need the whole set because it tells you what page to go to in that book. So I can't use the Syntopicon really to look something up in my version of Paradise Lost, for example, because it's not going to be the right page number. So like right here, for example, Milton, Paradise Lost, talks about punishment in book. I mean, I guess I could kind of use it. Book 4, verses 32 to 104. But then it tells you here, 153A to 154B, book 9. So it'd be a lot easier if I had the full set to go to Paradise Lost within the set, within the original Britannica set, and find exactly the section that he says to go to. But what's cool about this, and what I might do after I finish Emerson, is if on average the introduction section for each idea is like 8 pages, I think. See here, this is the second volume, or third volume, but second part of the Syntopicon. Right here, for all the ideas: angel, animal, aristocracy, art, astronomy, beauty, being, cause, chance, change, citizen, constitution. Each of these ideas has like an 8-page introduction to it, like written by Mortimer Adler, I think. And that would be worth reading. And if there's like 100 something ideas, 102 ideas, and I'm guessing, rough estimate, on average 8 pages of introduction content, it's like 800 pages. It's like longer than this. I spend a lot of time reading the introduction sections for all 100 ideas. I feel like that'd be a really cool use of time. But I will at least read through this, which is the first volume, The Great Conversation, which is but one where Adler calls the Western tradition of writing literature that kind of responds to earlier literature, adds to it. There's like 10 chapters in here. The tradition of the West, modern times, education and economics, the disappearance of liberal education, experimental science, education for all, the education of adults, the next great change, East and West, a letter to the reader. Yeah, I'd love to have the rest of this set. And these volumes are like in pretty good condition. Like the binding's not destroyed yet. So these were good finds at the used bookstore. Had a couple other volumes from the set, but obviously not the complete set. You can still buy it like new, I think, on Amazon. Just like $300. Maybe more than that. When were these published, I wonder? 1952. It's like 75 years old, almost. Pretty good shape for being over 70. All right. Yeah, I might also get into my Hemingway books, which I like to read on my stream as well. And also the Hunter S. Thompson stuff. That's obviously way less philosophical and more, I don't know. Doesn't make it less valuable to read, I think. It just sort of scratches a different itch. Better for learning how to write, probably, than Emerson, or learning how to write in a way that would be entertaining, engaging, mass appealing. Man, I read this thing so much, studied it so closely, all the highlighting. I don't know why I thought it would. Well, I guess it was sort of the beginning of my actual education. Besides, well, my liberal education, you might say. Mortimer Adler was quite the bookworm. He also wrote this book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes, by the author of How to Read a Book. Consciousness and its objects, the intellect and the senses, words and meanings, knowledge and opinion, moral values, happiness and contentment, freedom of choice, human nature, human society, human existence. Never read this, but pretty sure I bought it used. It's a good find. One time I went in a used bookstore and they charged me full price for everything I picked out. I was like, what the fuck? Is this on Barnes & Noble? And I just paid what they wanted. Didn't want to look like a poor person, or just that I didn't know what was going on. Okay, enough procrastinating. Time has come to finish Emerson. Except for his poems. I also want to read Paradise Lost aloud. I've read it multiple times to myself. But there's so many allusions that I'm not educated enough to understand. Allusions to like Bible stories and Greek and Roman mythology. I might try to study this a little more thoroughly so I can at least know a little bit of who he's talking about when he alludes to all this different stuff and how to pronounce the names of the people and places he's alluding to. And then I can sort of read it in a more clear way. Paradise Lost is a really cool work. Epic poem, I guess. The Christian story of the fall of man, written in a ancient Greek epic poem style, like Iliad or Odyssey. But written by an Englishman from the Age of Enlightenment. Kind of what he imagined, I guess. What he imagined might have been like when Satan rebelled against the Creator. A lot of people think that book is like puts Lucifer in a favorable light, which is sort of a weird take because it doesn't. It shows that he is basically just lost his mind. And is raging angry against being defeated. All right, Abraham Lincoln. The 19th of April was the anniversary of the Battle of Concord and Lexington. In 1865, however, it was the day when funeral services were held in Concord for the martyred president. Emerson was one of the speakers in the old meeting house that day. In 1862, Emerson had been taken to the White House to meet Lincoln, who recalled having attended April 19th, anniversary of the Battle of Concord and Lexington. Also the day when the funeral services were held for Abraham Lincoln. 1862, Emerson had been taken to the White House to meet Lincoln, who recalled having attended one of Emerson's lectures. Nature, they say, doth dote, and cannot make a man, save on some worn-out plan, repeating us by rote. For him her old world molds aside she threw, and choosing sweet clay from the breast of the unexhausted West, with stuff untainted shaped a hero new, wise, steadfast in the strength of God and true. How beautiful to see, once more a shepherd of mankind indeed, who loved his charge, but never loved to lead, one whose meek flock the people joyed to be, not lured by any cheat of birth, but by his clear-grained human worth, and brave old wisdom of sincerity. They knew that outward grace is dust. They could not choose but trust in that sure-footed mind's unfaltering skill and supple-tempered will, that bent like perfect steel to spring again and thrust. Nothing of Europe here or then, of Europe fronting mornward still, ere any names of serf and pure could nature's equal scheme deface. Here was a type of the true elder race, and one of Plutarch's men talked with us face to face. I guess he's talking about Abraham Lincoln. Lowell Commemoration Ode. Or somebody that Emerson thought was comparable to Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln. We meet under the gloom of a calamity which darkens down over the minds of good men in all civil society, as the fearful tidings travel over sea and over land from country to country, like the shadow of an uncalculated eclipse over the planet. Old as history is, and manyfold as are its tragedies, I doubt if any death has caused so much pain to mankind as this has caused, or will cause, on its announcement, and this, not so much because nations are by modern arts brought so closely together, as because of the mysterious hopes and fears which in the present day are connected with the name and institutions of America. In this country, on Saturday, everyone was struck dumb and saw at first only deep below deep as he meditated on the ghastly blow. And perhaps at this hour, when the coffin which contains the dust of the president sets forward on its long march through mourning states on its way to his home in Illinois, we might well be silent and suffer the awful voices of the time to thunder to us. Yes, but that first despair was brief. The man was not so to be mourned. He was the most active and hopeful of men. And this work had not perished, but acclamations of praise for the task he had accomplished burst out into a song of triumph which even tears for his death cannot keep down. The president stood before us, a man of the people. He was thoroughly American, had never crossed the sea, had never been spoiled by English insularity or French dissipation. A quite naive aboriginal man, as an acorn from the oak. No aping of foreigners, no frivolous accomplishments, Kentuckian born. Working on a farm, a flatboatman, a captain in the Black Hawk War, a country lawyer, a representative in the rural legislature of Illinois. On such modest foundations, the broad structure of his frame was laid. How slowly and yet by happily prepared steps, he came to his place. All of us remember. It is only a history of 5 or 6 years. The surprise and the disappointment of the country at his first nomination by the convention at Chicago. Mr. Seward, then in the culmination of his good fame, was the favorite of the eastern states, and when the new and comparatively unknown name of Lincoln was announced, notwithstanding the report of the acclamations of that convention, we heard the result coldly and sadly. It seemed too rash on a purely local reputation to build so grave a trust in such anxious times, and men naturally talked of the chances in politics as incalculable. But it turned out not to be chance. The profound good opinion which the people of Illinois and of the West had conceived of him, and which they had imparted to their colleagues, that they also might justify themselves to their constituents at home, was not rash, though they did not begin to know the riches of his worth. A plain man of the people, and extraordinary fortune attended him. He offered no shining qualities at the first encounter. He did not offend, which inspired confidence, which confirmed. He offered no shining qualities. He did not offend by superiority. He had a face and manner which disarmed suspicion, which inspired confidence, which confirmed goodwill. He was a man without vices. He had a strong sense of duty, which it was very easy for him to obey. Then he had what farmers called a long head, was excellent in working out the sum for himself, in arguing his case and convincing you fairly and firmly. Then it turned out that he was a great worker, had prodigious faculty of performance, worked easily. A good worker is so rare. Everybody has some disabling quality. And a host of young men that start together and promise so many brilliant leaders for the next age, each fails on trial, one by bad health, one by conceit, or by love of pleasure, or lethargy, or an ugly temper. Each has some disqualifying fault that throws him out of the career. But this man was sound to the core, cheerful, persistent, all right for labor, and liked nothing so well. Then he had a vast good nature, which made him tolerant and accessible to all, fair-minded, leaning to the claim of the petitioner, affable, and not sensible to the affliction which the innumerable visits paid to him when president would have brought to anyone else. And how this good nature became a noble humanity in many a tragic case which the events of the war brought to him, everyone will remember. And with what increasing tenderness he dealt when a whole race was thrown on his compassion. The poor Negro said of him on an impressive occasion, "Massa Lincoln am everywhere." Then his broad good humor, running easily into jocular talk, in which he delighted and in which he excelled, was a rich gift to this wise man. It enabled him to keep his secret, to meet every kind of man and every rank in society, to take off the edge of the severest decisions, to mask his own purpose and sound his companion, and to catch with true instinct the temper of every company he addressed, And more than all, it is to a man of severe labor in anxious and exhausting crises the natural restorative good-ass sleep. It is the protection of the overdriven brain against rancor and insanity. He is the author of a multitude of good sayings, so disguised as pleasantries that it is certain they had no reputation at first but as jests, and only later, by the very acceptance and adoption they find in the mouth of millions, turn out to be the wisdom of the hour. I am sure if this man had ruled in a period of less facility of printing, he would have become mythological in a very few years, like Aesop or Pilpay, or one of the 7 wise masters, by his fables and proverbs. But the weight and penetration of many passages in his letters, messages, and speeches, hidden now by the very closeness of their application to the moment, are destined hereafter to wide fame. What pregnant definitions, what unerring common sense, what foresight, and on great occasion, what lofty and more than national, what humane tone. His brief speech at Gettysburg will not easily be surpassed by words on any recorded occasion. This and one other American speech, that of John Brown to the court that tried him, in a part of Kossuth's speech at Birmingham, can only be compared with each other, and with no fourth. His occupying the chair of state was a triumph of the good sense of mankind and of the public conscience. This middle-class country had got a middle-class president at last. Yes, in manners and sympathies, but not in powers, for his powers were superior. This man grew according to the need. His mind mastered the problem of the day, and as the problem grew, so did his comprehension of it. Rarely was man so fitted to the event. In the midst of fears and jealousies, in the babel of councils and parties, this man wrought incessantly with all his might and all his honesty, laboring to find what people wanted and how to obtain that. It cannot be said there is any exaggeration of his worth. If ever a man was fairly tested, he was. There was no lack of resistance, nor of slander, nor of ridicule. The times have allowed no state secrets. The nation has been in such ferment, such multitudes had to be trusted, that no secret could be kept. Every door was ajar, and we know all that befell. Then, what an occasion was the whirlwind of the war. Here was place for no holiday magistrate, no fair-weather sailor. The new pilot was hurried to the helm in a tornado. In 4 years of battle days. His endurance, his fertility of resources, his magnanimity were sorely tried, and never found wanting. There, by his courage, his justice, his even temper, his fertile counsel, his humanity, he stood a heroic figure in the center of a heroic epoch. He is the true history of the American people in his time. Step by step, he walked before them, slow with their slowness, quickening his march by theirs, the true representative of this continent, an entirely public man, father of his country, the pulse of 20 millions throbbing in his heart, the thought of their minds articulated by his tongue. Adam Smith remarks that the axe, which in Houbraken's portraits of British kings and worthies is engraved under those who have suffered at the block, adds a certain lofty charm to the picture. And who does not see, even in this tragedy so recent, how fast the terror and ruin of the massacre are already burning into glory around the victim. Far happier this fate than to have lived to be wished away, to have watched the decay of his own faculties, to have seen, perhaps even he, the proverbial ingratitude of statesmen, to have seen mean men preferred. Had he not lived long enough to keep the greatest promise that ever man made to his fellow men, the practical abolition of slavery? He had seen Tennessee, Missouri, and Maryland emancipate their slaves. He had seen Savannah, Charleston, and Richmond surrender, had seen the main army of the rebellion lay down its arms. He had conquered the public opinion of Canada, England, and France. Only Washington can compare with him in fortune. And what if it should turn out in the unfolding of the web that he had reached the term, that this heroic deliverer could no longer serve us, that the rebellion had touched its natural conclusion, and what remained to be done required new and uncommitted hands, a new spirit born out of the ashes of the war, and that heaven, wishing to show the world a completed benefactor, shall make him serve his country even more by his death than by his life. Nations like things are not good by facility and complacence. The kindness of kings consists in justice and strength. Easy good nature has been the dangerous foible of the republic, and it was necessary that its enemies should outrage it and drive us to unwonted firmness to secure the salvation of this country in the next ages. The ancients believed in a serene and beautiful genius which ruled in the affairs of nations, which, with a slow but stern justice, carried forward the fortunes of certain chosen houses, weeding out single offenders or offending families, and securing at last the firm prosperity of the favorites of heaven. It was too narrow a view of the eternal nemesis. There is a serene providence which rules the fate of nations, which makes little account of time, little of one generation or race, makes no account of disasters, conquers alike by what is called defeat or by what is called victory, thrusts aside enemy and obstruction, crushes everything immoral as inhuman, and obtains the ultimate triumph of the best race by the sacrifice of everything which resists the moral laws of the world. It makes its own instruments, creates the man for the time, trains him in poverty, inspires his genius, and arms him for his task. It has given every race its own talent, and ordains that only that race which combines perfectly with the virtues of all shall endure. Give myself enough time to breathe. That's what I like to do. Deep breathing, oxygenation sessions before I try to read for hours on end. Alrighty. Final essay of the book. Finally free from Emerson for now. Now, it's unfortunate I don't have more of his stuff to read, because it's all so worth reading. Carlyle. Emerson and Carlyle first met in 1833 when neither of them was well known. In spite of grave differences in temperament, they were strongly attached to each other. Out of mutual esteem, which served as spokesmen for the other in England or America, respectively. They corresponded frequently all their lives. They met for the second time in 1847 and 1848, when Emerson was lecturing in England. After Carlyle's death, the Massachusetts Historical Society invited Emerson to speak at a meeting in Boston in February 1881. At this time, well on in years and failing mentally, Emerson was unable to prepare an address. But he did read this brief paper, most of which he took from a letter written in 1848 after his second visit with Carlyle. Hold with the maker, not the maid. Sit with the cause, or grim or glad. Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle is an immense talker, as extraordinary in his conversation as in his writing. I think even more so. Wait, this was a letter. A letter of which from a letter written in 1848 after his second visit with Carlyle. Most of which he took. Brief paper. Okay. Thomas Carlyle is an immense talker, as extraordinary in his conversation as in his writing. I think even more so. I don't know who this is. He is not mainly a scholar, like the most of my acquaintances, but a practical Scotchman, such as you would find in any saddler's or iron dealer's shop, and then only accidentally, and by a surprising addition, the admirable scholar and writer he is. If you would know precisely how he talks, just suppose Hugh Whelan, the gardener, had found leisure enough, in addition to all his daily work, to read Plato and Shakespeare, Augustine and Calvin, and remaining Hugh Whelan all the time, should talk scornfully of all this nonsense of books that he had been bothered with, and you shall have just the tone and talk and laughter of Carlyle. I called him a trip hammer with an Aeolian attachment. He has, too, the strong religious tinge you sometimes find in burly people. That and all his qualities have a certain virulence, coupled though it be in his case with the utmost impatience of Christendom and Judom, and all existing presentiments of the good old story. He talks like a very unhappy man, profoundly solitary, displeased and hindered by all men and things about him, and biding his time, meditating how to undermine and explode the whole world of nonsense which torments him. He is obviously greatly respected by all sorts of people, understands his own value quite as well as Webster, of whom his behavior sometimes reminds me, and can see society on his own terms. And though no mortal in America could pretend to talk with Carlyle, who is also as remarkable in England as the Tower of London, yet neither would he in any manner satisfy us Americans, or begin to answer the questions which we ask. He is a very national figure, and would by no means bear transplantation. They keep Carlyle as a sort of portable cathedral bell, which they like to produce in companies where he is unknown, and set a swinging to the surprise and consternation of all persons. Bishops, courtiers, scholars, writers, and as in companies here in England, no man is named or introduced great is the effect and great the inquiry. Forster and Rawdon described to me a dinner at the Table d'Hôte of some provincial hotel where he carried Carlyle and where an Irish canon had uttered something. Carlyle began to talk, first to the waiters, and then to the walls, and then lastly, unmistakably, to the priest in a manner that frightened the whole company. Young men, especially those holding liberal opinions, pressed to see him, but it strikes me like being hot to see the mathematical or Greek professor before they have got their lesson. It needs something more than a clear shirt and a reading German and reading German to visit him. He treats them with contempt. They profess freedom and he stands for slavery. They praise republics and he likes the Russian Tsar. They admire Cobden and free trade, and he is a protectionist in political economy. They will eat vegetables and drink water, and he is a Scotsman who thinks English national character has a pure enthusiasm for beef and mutton. Describes with gusto the crowds of people who gaze at the sirloins in the dealer's shop window, and even likes the Scotch nightcap. They praise moral suasion. He goes for murder, money, capital punishment, and other pretty abominations of English law. They wish freedom of the press, and he thinks the first thing he would do if he got into Parliament would be to turn out the reporters and stop all manner of mischievous speaking to Buncombe and windbags. Speaking to Buncombe and windbags. In the long Parliament, he says, the only great Parliament, they sat secret and silent, grave as in ecumenical council. And I know not what they would have done to anybody that had got in there and attempted to tell out of doors what they did. They go for free institutions, for letting things alone and only giving opportunity and motive to every man. He for a stringent government that shows people what they must do and makes them do it. Here, he says, the Parliament gathers up 6 millions of pounds every year to give to the poor, and yet the people starve. I think if they would give it to me to provide to the poor with labor and with authority to make them work or shoot them, and I to be hanged if I did not do it, I could find them in plenty of Indian meal. He throws himself readily on the other side. If you urge free trade, he remembers that every laborer is a monopolist. The navigation laws of England made its commerce. St. John was insulted by the Dutch. He came home, got the law passed that foreign vessels should pay high fees, and it cut the throat of the Dutch and made the English trade. If you boast of the growth of the country and show him the wonderful results of the census, he finds nothing so depressing as the sight of a great mob. He saw once, as he told me, 3 or 4 miles of human beings and fancied that Erith was some great cheese and these were mites. If a Tory takes heart at his hatred of stump oratory and model republics, he replies, "Yes, the idea of a pig-headed soldier who will obey orders and fire on his own father at the command of his officer is a great comfort to the aristocratic mind." It is not so much that Carlyle cares for this or that dogma as that he likes geniusness, the source of all strength, in his companions. If a scholar goes into a camp of lumbermen or a gang of riggers, those men will quickly detect any fault of character. Nothing will pass with them but what is real and sound. So this man is a hammer that crushes mediocrity and pretension. He detects weakness on the instant and touches it. He has a vivacious, aggressive temperament and unimpressionable. The literary, the fashionable, the political man, each fresh from triumphs in his own sphere, comes eagerly to see this man, whose fun they have heartily enjoyed, sure of a welcome, and are struck with despair at the first onset. His firm, victorious, scoffing vituperation strikes them with chill and hesitation. His talk often reminds you of what was said of Johnson. If his pistol missed fire, he would knock you down with the butt end. Mere intellectual partisanship wearies him. He detects in an instant if a man stands for any cause to which he is not born and organically committed. A natural defender of anything, a lover who will live and die for that which he speaks for, and who does not care for him or for anything but his own business, he respects. And the nobler this object, of course, the better. He hates a literary trifler, and if, after Guizot, had been a tool of Louis Philippe for years, he is now to come and write essays on the character of Washington, on, quote, the beautiful, and on, quote, philosophy of history. He thinks that nothing. Great is his reverence for realities, for all such traits as spring from the intrinsic nature of the actor. He humors this into the idolatry of strength. A strong nature has a charm for him, previous, it would seem, to all inquiry, whether the force be divine or diabolic. He preaches, as by cannonade, the doctrine that every noble nature was made by God, and contains, if savage passions, also fit checks and grand impulses, and however extravagant, will keep its orbit and return from far. Nor can that decorum, which is the idol of the Englishman, and in attaining which the Englishman exceeds all nations, win from him any obeisance. Win from him any obeisance. He is eaten up with indignation against such as desire to make a fair show in the flesh. Combined with this warfare on respectabilities, and indeed pointing all his satire is the severity of his moral sentiment, in proportion to the peals of laughter amid which he strips the plumes of a pretender and shows the lean hypocrisy to every vantage of ridicule? Does he worship whatever enthusiasm, fortitude, love, or other sign of good nature is in a man? There is nothing deeper in his constitution than his humor, than the considerate, condescending good nature with which he looks at every object in existence, as a man might look at a mouse. He feels that the perfection of health is sportiveness, and will not look grave even at dullness or tragedy. His guiding genius is his moral sense, his perception of the sole importance of truth and justice. But that is a truth of character, not of catechisms. He says there is properly no religion in England. These idle nobles at Tattersall's, there is no work or word of serious purpose in them. They have this great lying church, and life is a humbug. He prefers Cambridge to Oxford, but he thinks Oxford and Cambridge education indurates the young men as the sticks-hardened Achilles, so that when they come forth of them, they say, "Now we are proof. We have gone through all the degrees, and are case-hardened against the veracities of the universe. Nor man nor God can penetrate us." Wellington he respects as real and honest, and as having made up his mind once for all that he will not have to do with any kind of lie. Edwin Chadwick is one of his heroes, who proposes to provide every house in London with pure water, 60 gallons to every head, at a penny a week. And in the decay and downfall of all religions, Carlyle thinks that the only religious act which a man nowadays can securely perform is to wash himself well. Of course, the new French Revolution of 1848 was the best thing he had seen. And the teaching this great swindler, Louis Philippe, that there is a God's justice in the universe, after all, was a great satisfaction. Tsar Nicholas was his hero, for in the ignominy of Europe, when all thrones fell like card houses, and no man was found with conscience enough to fire a gun for his crown, but everyone ran away in a cow with his head shaved through the Barriere de Passy. One man remained who believed he was put there by God Almighty to govern his empire, and by the help of God had resolved to stand there. He was very serious about the bad times. He had seen this evil coming, but thought it would not come in his time. But now it is coming, and the only good he sees in it is the visible appearance of the gods. He thinks it the only question for wise men, instead of art and fine fancies and poetry and such things, to address themselves to the problem of society. This confusion is the inevitable end of such falsehoods and nonsense as they have been embroiled with. Carlyle has, best of all men in England, kept the manly attitude in his time. He has stood for scholars, asking no scholar what he should say. Holding an honored place in the best society, he has stood for the people, for the Chartist, for the pauper, intrepidly and scornfully, teaching the nobles their peremptory duties. His errors of opinion are as nothing in comparison with this merit, in my judgment. This aplomb cannot be mimicked. It is the speaking to the heart of the thing. And in England, where the morgue of aristocracy has very slowly admitted scholars into society, A very few houses only in the high circles being ever open to them, he has carried himself erect, made himself a power confessed by all men, and taught scholars their lofty duty. He never feared the face of man. And that's it, except for the commentary, which I guess I might as well read. It's like 1.5 pages. Henry James. Emerson did something better than anyone else. He had a particular faculty which has not been surpassed for speaking to the soul in a voice of direction and authority. There have been many spiritual voices appealing, consoling, reassuring, exhorting, or even denouncing and terrifying, but none has had just that firmness and just that purity. It penetrates further. It seems to go back to the roots of our feelings, to where conduct and manhood begin. And moreover, to us today, there is something in it that says that it is connected somehow with the virtue of the world, has wrought and achieved, lived in thousands of minds, produced a mass of character and life. And there is the further sign of Emerson's singular power, that he is a striking exception to the general rule that writings live in the last resort by their form, that they owe a large part of their fortune to the art with which they have been composed. It is hardly too much or too little to say of Emerson's writings in general that they are not composed at all. Many things are beautifully said. He had felicities, inspirations, unforgettable phrases. He had frequently an exquisite elegance. From partial portraits. Robert Frost. I suppose I've always thought I'd like to name in verse someday my 4 greatest Americans: George Washington, the general and statesman; Thomas Jefferson, the political thinker; Abraham Lincoln, the martyr and savior; and 4th, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the poet. I take these names because they are going around the world. They are not just local. Emerson's name has gone as a poetic philosopher, or as a philosophical poet, my favorite kind of both. I am disposed to cheat myself and others in favor of any poet I am in love with. I hear people say the more they love anyone, the more they see their faults. Nonsense. Love is blind and should be left so. Matthew Arnold. Emerson's systematic benevolence comes from what he himself calls somewhere his persistent optimism. And his persistent optimism is the root of his greatness and the source of his charm. One can scarcely overrate the importance of thus holding fast to happiness and hope. It gives to Emerson's work an invaluable virtue, as Wordsworth's poetry is, in my opinion, the most important work done in verse in our language during the present century. So Emerson's essays are, I think, the most important work done in prose. In this country, it is difficult not to be sanguine. Very many of your writers are over-sanguine, and on the wrong grounds. But you have 2 men who, in what they have written, show their sanguineness in a line where courage and hope are just, where they are also infinitely important, but where they are not easy. The 2 men are Franklin and Emerson. These 2 are, I think, the most distinctively and honorably American of your writers. They are the most original and the most valuable. Benjamin Franklin? Oliver Wendell Holmes. Those who lost themselves in the pages of nature will find their way clearly enough through those of the American scholar It is a plea for generous culture, for the development of all the faculties, many of which tend to become atrophied by the exclusive pursuit of single objects of thought. This grand oration was our intellectual declaration of independence. Nothing like it had been heard in the halls of Harvard. The young men went out from it as if a prophet had been proclaiming to them, "Thus saith the Lord." No listener ever forgot that address, and among all the noble utterances of the speaker, it may be questioned if one ever contained more truth in the language, more like that of immediate inspiration. Henry David Thoreau. This following is an entry in Thoreau's journal, believed to have been recorded in 1847. Emerson seeks to realize a divine life, his affections and intellect equally developed, has advanced farther, and a new heaven opens up to him. Love and friendship, religion, poetry, the holy are familiar to him. The life of an artist, more variegated, more observing, finer perception, not so robust, elastic, practical enough in his own field, faithful, a judge of men. There's no such general critic of men and things, no such trustworthy and faithful man, more of the divine realized in him than any, a poetic critic reserving the unqualified nouns for the gods. Emerson has special talents unequaled. The divine in man has had no more easy, methodically distinct impression, his personal influence upon young persons greater than any man's. In his world, every man would be a poet. Love would reign. Beauty would take place. Man and nature would harmonize. Dang. That was a lot. You know, the reason I ever became interested in Emerson's writings was because, well, it's not really that important, but I read Self-Reliance, the essay, thought it was good, or I listened to it. But I think before I even read Self-Reliance, I studied this entire thing when I was living in a trailer by myself. This was the complete works of James Allen, who I thought was particularly, I don't know, sort of easy, like an entry-level writer about like spiritual and philosophical stuff. And I read his 8 Pillars of Prosperity over and over. But I guess before I read 8 Pillars of Prosperity, I read As a Man Thinketh. That's his most popular book amongst like business, self-help writers, motivational speakers. And I liked that, but I thought 8 Pillars of Prosperity was really a good way to think about just virtue. And then I bought this, and I worked my way through it every morning when I was living in a trailer by myself, working at an airport. And I had to get up really early to go to work. I remember I got up like an hour early every day and read some of this giant thing, highlighted some stuff, which is kind of cool because the trailer was out in the hills and it was real early in the morning. So it was sort of like a real quiet time to study stuff like this. Still dark out, like 4 in the morning, like 3:30 in the morning. But he talks about James Allen was around the same time as Emerson, maybe a little bit after him. And he talked about Emerson being sort of the inspiration for himself. So I've read his complete works, and now I've read Emerson's essential writings. But Emerson definitely is the sort of more deep, less less easy to understand what he's talking about writer, for sure. Kind of more involved. I'm trying to understand what he's talking about. Now, James Allen talks a lot more about, like, you know, the light of the soul and, like, so he's talking about, like, Buddhist type stuff. Out from the heart, byways of blessedness, the life triumphant, through the gate of good, the mastery of destiny, above life's turmoil, from passion to peace, man, king of mind, body, and circumstance, light on life's difficulties, the shining gateway. A lot more Christian, I think. Sort of spiritual. Whereas Emerson, it's a lot more to do with real things, real people, real events, examples of things. More experience, more thought. Not necessarily more thought, but more real experience and wisdom in Emerson's writings. But James Allen is definitely a good, you know, guy to read too. Just a lot less well known, less recognized as a great writer. For me, he was like an entry-level philosopher. Well, I don't know if I'm going to read his poetry. I'll read it to myself someday. I'm going to put this back somewhere up here on the bookshelf. it back on the bookshelf. The Modern Library Classics. I don't know if I have any other. Try to organize these books by publisher. Kind of. Which I find pleasing to the eye. Where does this go? Up here? Where did I put that? This stuff. Well, this stuff shouldn't be down here. Yeah, I put it there because the Walden was too big. This is like fiction. Yeah, Walden's too big. Could fit here. Second shelf. Maybe yeah, just I'll put Walden right here. Put this stuff up here. It's a little more appropriate. Oh yeah. This was what I studied a little bit. Used to really believe in literature. I guess I still do. But I had almost a superstitious idea about it, like it would have some kind of magical effect on changing my life. Maybe I'll get that feeling again someday. I guess it has kind of changed my life. That or just coincidentally was something I concentrated on while getting my shit together after high school. After college, really. I think I'll put this up here. I don't know if I like this stuff over here. Conrad. And this is Mark Twain. I got like heavy, a lot of like, here's Heart of Darkness. Oh yeah, this goes with this, same publisher. It's my Paradise Lost books. Where's the other one? Oh, here it is. I'll leave these here. This one doesn't have a publisher. That's kind of strange. But it does have Made in USA, San Bernardino. What's cool about this copy of Paradise Lost that I have is there's illustrations. All these like really good illustrations. Illustrated by Gustave Doré. Really good, like sketches, pencil art. There's a lot of missing punctuation, though, from the text, which is kind of weird. Like, if you look at this, there's way more punctuation, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am. I don't know. Well, this goes with Signet Classics. This is an unmarked publisher. Maybe I'll put it up here. Or Emerson. Another unmarked publisher. Just a white freaking. Put this over here. I'll put this right here next to. Well, I won't put it right next to Shakespeare. I guess this doesn't really matter. I'm gonna put it down here. And this stuff, I need to better organize this. I mean, that's fine. This is not really doesn't really follow any pattern. All my self-help books. Bunch of network marketing books. Which I might get back into someday, I don't know. Seems like it'd be fun. Just go, much like a Christian evangelist, just go around trying to recruit people to your modern day cult. Except it's like not really a cult. Depends what company you choose. A lot of work, though. Selling supplements. Fun work. If you are a charismatic people person, which I'm not, I found out, but I like the idea of being that. I guess I just decided making a bunch of money and helping people with health issues wasn't all that important. Compared with actually enjoying your life. Or at least being legitimately interested in it. All right, where's Conrad? I have Conrad right here. I'll put that right there. And I have Fitzgerald right here. Maybe I'll put this down here. Leave that up there. Probably organize my books here a little bit. Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. Okay, that's organized. Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. The Infinite Self. I think a buddy I worked with at In-N-Out, whose family was into some network marketing company, lent me that. The only kid I got along with at that place. Too bad I kept it. It's one of my major flaws, is just not giving people their books back. Ever. So we just kind of organize this by the size of the book. Make it look a little better. Waking the sleeping giant within. Awaken. Booster crushes. And then my poker books. A few sort of random. I guess I should put these up there. Random, like, comic books. Travel books. Survival books. And my libertarian Ron Paul stuff over here, along with some American history, and my conspiratorial books, Founding Fathers, Dark Alliance, Creature from Jekyll Island, Case Against Fluoride, which I actually studied quite a bit. I took all these copious notes on this book. I don't know what I was thinking I was going to use with that knowledge, but I guess I didn't get all the way through it. By the looks of it, I got to like chapter 7. guess I was really like struggling for some sense of purpose in my early 20s, mid 20s. Mid 20s, early 20s, I was happily careless. All right. So, I think next time I do a little study session or reading session. I'm going to start reading Mortimer Adler. Great conversation, great ideas, essays, I guess you could say, on the great ideas. It's like 100 of them. Probably around 800 pages, big pages worth of writing. It'll be an education in itself. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. If I don't do that, maybe while I'm doing that, the reading that I read and that I actually like to listen to after I've recorded it is really Hunter S. Thompson. It's the stuff I like to listen to while I'm out and about or whatever. I should put this over here probably. And I would probably like to listen to my Hemingway stuff more if I did a better job of recording it. I guess I did an okay job, but Hunter S. Thompson's just more entertaining to listen to. I like the idea of being productive. Seems like there's a wisdom in that. Being productive like a writer was, like Hunter S. Thompson or Hemingway was productive. I mean, these guys obviously were productive as well, but in Aristotle, Plato, Aristotle, he was Plato's teacher, right? And then the other famous Greek philosopher, who's the other guy? Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Was he Plato's student? I read a whole essay about Plato. Emerson's Great Men essays. And I think he talked a little bit about Aristotle. Or was Socrates? I never remember. It's because I haven't really read much of their work. Was Socrates. Who instructed Plato? That's the question. All right. Plato was a student of Socrates. Aristotle was a student of Plato, I think. Who instructed Plato or Aristotle? Aristotle's most famous teacher was Plato, who was the student of Socrates. Okay. Of course. And Socrates was just some guy who liked to party. Did he even write anything? He must have. Writings of Socrates. Socrates did not write anything, but his teachings are known through the writings of his students, including Plato and Xenophon. Right, okay. That's cool. All right, I might take a shower and I'm gonna try to clean my garage. Or I already cleaned the garage. I'm gonna try to go start taking my bike apart. So I have not made any time for that since I moved in almost a month ago, and I still have no